Hey guys, Chris from Provo Beast Audio Installation, and today we're doing a radio install in this 2016 Ford F150. In this install, we're going to show you how to remove the factory radio and bezel. We'll head over to the bench to assemble our new bezel, including the dash kit and wiring harness. Get everything reinstalled. Let's get started. Alright, so here we are in the car. Now, the first thing that we need to do is just ensure that all your discs are out of the CD slot, because once we get this all pulled apart, you will no longer be able to pull any of the discs out. What we need to do is use a panel tool and pop that panel up, because it will expose some screws that we need to remove. So let's go ahead and get this pulled out. Okay. We pop that on out. It just has 4 clips, 1, 2, 3, and 4. Okay, so once those are out, you're gonna expose two, I believe they're 7mm, they're on the top. Okay, so with those 2 screws now removed, again, go ahead and pop this top pocket out. It should be just held on with clips. Okay, so those 3 clips across the top. Okay, so we disconnected our center channel, set that off to the side. Okay, and finally, we got our last 2 screws here on the top of the radio. Let's remove those. Just unsnap it using your fingers. Okay. All right, so at this time our bezel has come free. You should just be able to disconnect your harnesses here. You press on the clip and they should just go ahead and unsnap. Okay, those are done. Okay, so we can put this guy off to the side just for now. What that does now leaves us our factory screen as well as the actual radio that's down below. Both need to come out. So using that same 7mm, let's go ahead and remove those. Okay, disconnect your harnesses. So we're totally done with this guy. Set him off to the side. You can put your screws back in on the left and right hand side, just in case down the road you decide to put the radio back in, the factory equipment. You don't have to be looking for the screws. Okay, so finally here we have this main last module. It is in the way of our factory radio, so we do need to remove this guy as well. This is the factory sync system, which we're not retaining, so we'll just disconnect it. Okay, and then finally here we have our factory backup camera module that we'll probably have to move to give us clearance for our new radio, so we'll show you that here in a bit. But really at this point we've disconnected everything. What we can do at this point in time is head over to the bench and show you the kit that we're going to go with to allow us to install a double den here in the factory location. First and foremost is this kit. Now this makes it happen. Without this kit, this makes it very difficult to get everything installed properly. This is specifically a kit for those factory Ford F150 and F250 vehicles with the 4.3-inch display. So this is the Radio Pro 4 by Pac Audio. It's the RPk4-FD2101. Super important with this one specifically because it also helps you retain the factory climate controls and buttons, while at the same time allowing you to install your own double den in the factory location. Now the radio we've chosen to go with this is this nicer, higher end wireless Apple Carplay Android audio unit by Pioneer. It's the AVH-W4500NEX. First thing that we need to do is get this kit all pulled apart. We'll show you everything that it comes with, and we also have to prep a radio and wiring harness to be mounted in this kit before we get it in the car. Now in this box, first and foremost, they have a nice instruction manual. It's about 15 pages long. A lot of information here. It's nice and in color, which is super convenient. It's super important that we read through this entirely. You don't want to miss any steps, or you could potentially damage your own vehicle or the equipment itself that they've provided. So you have your component instructions here, includes everything within the box. So some of the important instructions here: first and foremost, be sure to be very familiar with this before you tackle this yourself. Talks about the transferring of the HVAC controls. It's only compatible in vehicles with a 4-inch screen. It does not retain sync, does not retain aux inputs on 2015 vehicles with sync, doesn't retain external temperature displayed on the factory screen. We're only going to use one of the video harnesses, so depending on the year of vehicle, you may use one versus the other. Chimes will play through the small dash speaker and not the cabin speakers, and also tells you to use the correct screws when reassembly here. As we flip this on over, we also see how to disassemble the dash, which is super important. So it'll go through this procedure step by step for you. Also walks you through the whole process of transferring over the circuit board, the buttons, everything that will be needed from the old dash to the new dash bezel. Same thing, walks you through step by step here. And then next page here on page 9, it talks about the dip switch configuration based on the radio that you're looking to install. Walks you through the process of all that, and it also helps identify what color goes where on each of the wiring harness adapters. Get yourself familiarized with everything within this kit itself. As we get this pulled on out, this is our main dash bezel. We're going to be very careful with this because we don't want to damage or break this. Okay, so what we have here is a reverse cannon retention harness here. Now again, you have two versions depending on which backup camera factory system you have, one versus the other. That's included with the kit. In here we have our main harnesses, so we'll go ahead and pull this on out. We have our main module. This has all our connections needed, as well as our dip switch configuration and a port to update if needed. We have a USB GM1 retention harness that retains the factory USB for our aftermarket radio. We also have our main wiring harness adapter. With this wiring harness adapter, it includes our aux input if applicable, if your vehicle is so equipped with it, steering wheel controls, your main colors to wire up your new radio here, also your navigation wire, so it has everything generated by the CAN bus of the vehicle, so it's going to have your accessory, parking brake, illumination, vehicle speed sense, everything needed there. Now this is the end that plugs into the car itself. Also, like I said, is the alternative camera harness, so depending on which camera version you have, you'll be using this one or the other one included. And finally here we have our pocket covers and dash mounting bits and pieces that you'll need for the install. Okay, so we got everything ready to go. We can begin the process of transferring everything from the old bezel to the new bezel, and it does mention it in your instructions here on how to move your camera module. You unbolt it with 3 10mm, and then you just move it down and rebolt it with one and secure it with a zip tie. So that's essentially it. So what we're going to do is we're going to start at this point and start disassembling the factory bezel. Okay, so we got our screws removed, our buttons removed, as well as the 8 clips. Let's flip this on over. And again, super important that this is straight up and down, I guess at 12 o'clock. You don't want it barely off, you want it straight up and down. So there's going to be 2 tabs on each side that we have to unsnap. 1, 2, 3, 4. First thing we need to remove is our little gear. Okay, so once the gear is removed, then now we need to remove our 4 ribbon cables. Now each of these ribbon cables have these little tabs that lock them in on both sides. So essentially you can push these little tabs up. And pulling those tabs up allows these to come right on out. So pulling these tabs up, slowly work them out. There we go. Now with these bottom ones, you just lift straight on. These white clips, again, lift, they come up, straight up in the air. Okay, there's another ribbon cable, straight up. Okay, so with the 4 ribbon cables removed here, next thing we need to do is remove the 6 T10 screws from the button circuit board down here below. We got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and 6. Now these are different lengths, so we can't get them mixed up with any of the other screws. Okay, so we can pull out the bottom circuit board now, very carefully here. Okay, so once that's out of the way, now we can just pull these out carefully. We can remove our temperature control pad. Just like so. You just put the rubber pad back in it, just to hold everything in place. Okay, once that's out of the way, next thing we need to do is remove the 6 T10 screws from the middle circuit board. Okay, once those are all removed, we can remove the middle circuit board and set aside for use later. Now it does suggest that the rubber bottoms stay with the bezel just because it's not going to be needed on the new kit, so we can leave them behind. So we pull this on off. Next is we need to remove the this little bezel here as well. Pull that off to the side. And that is as far disassembled as we need to be, just because from this point forward, it's reassembly with all the parts that we pulled out into the new dash bezel. Okay, so at this point we have our new dash bezel. This thing is really nice. We don't want to scratch it, so we're going to do our best to keep it on this little pad. So we're going to flip this on over, and the first things we need to do is install our new switches. Now we can't just go ahead and plop them in. Depending on the model you have, it comes with 2 adapters, whether it's a 3 or a 2 slot bezel. We only have the 2, so we'll go ahead and put it in the 2 slot. Okay, so the first thing we need to do now on this bottom half is get our HVAC buttons in. Go ahead and make sure our little pad is in there nice and flush and flat. Then once that's in there, we're going to go ahead and put our HVAC control knobs in. And again, you got to remember that this needs to point straight in the middle. Straight in the middle, that little white line. It can't be left or right. Get that in there. Next, do the same with our fan speed. Finally, we can put our circuit board in. Now make sure that this is nice and flat and our rubbers are on this side still. Should just drop right into place. We will use the 16mm, the shorter ones, not the 22, not the longer ones. The 16mm, we're going to use 8 of these, and we're going to start securing back the circuit board down. Okay, so we got all 8 screws in these specific spots as indicated by the instructions. You don't want to just keep putting in screws because our other panel will go up and over it and use those mounting locations later on. Alright, so with that one done, next here we need to put our little gear back on. Okay, so there's the gear alignment mark. So essentially there's that little tab that needs to point towards the gear. We're going to try to get that in the identical spot here. Okay, so we got our gear in, and looking here, our alignment mark is identical to where it was when we removed it the first time around out of the factory bezel. Okay, so now at this point with the gear all set, we need to put the bottom circuit board housing to cover and protect this. Essentially here it just goes right on these guiding screws. It should snap into place. Okay, and once it snaps into place, we need to use 3 of the longer screws, the 22mm T10 screws, to get those secured. Alright, next we have our ribbon cables. Now we have to be extremely careful with these, and I've just already cut open the bag slightly. I don't want to accidentally damage it trying to open up the plastic, but we can pull these out now. So we want to make sure our little locks are open so we can insert our little ribbon cables here. Make sure the copper is facing you. So make sure it's fully seated so the copper is no longer seen. Then you can push your locks down, lock it into place just like so. Same thing on the other side. Okay, so with those 2 locked into place, next thing we need to do at this point is install our auxiliary panel that goes here in the middle. Alright, so we're going to grab our other circuit panel and just kind of put it right here for now. Just let it rest, because what we need to do is connect these 2 ribbon cables to this upper circuit board before we get it firmly mounted in place. These need to go to these upper ones. Okay, so we got our ribbon cables all attached to the bottom ones there, as you can see. And once those are connected, then what we do is we will move this slightly down here, and it just sits right in place with those tabs. Make sure our ribbon cables are still connected, no issue there. Now at this point, what we need to do is use 4 of the supplied screws that came with the kit to mount this piece to the bezel. This is all good to go. We need to add our panel now to cover the circuit board. Now once this is seated in place, then we're going to use 4 of the screws supplied with the kit to get this all mounted. Alright, so at this point our dash bezel is done. All completed, all installed. And then what we'll do as we get the radio installed, before we get this clipped and totally mounted in place, we'll ensure that everything works down here before we snap the bezel back into the dash itself. The next portion of our assembly has to do with our wiring. Now we have everything kind of spread out here. We have our main brain module that makes everything happen. We additionally have our antenna and USB adapters, main wiring harness adapter. We have our mic that we'll need to install, brackets for the radio itself, and our chosen radio, which happens to be a Pioneer, and its radio harness that we've already prepped. Now again, we have other bits and pieces that we'll use here in a minute, but at this point in time, what we need to do is start wiring up our chosen radio's wiring harness to the adapter supplied by Pac. Now in your instructions, it goes through everything that you need to do, and especially identifies what color does what. Now before you do anything, you need to make sure you set your dip switches on your Pac module. Since we happen to be doing a Pioneer, it looks like our dip switch 1, 2, and 3 need to be set to the on position. So on this happens to be down, and then we set 1, 2, and 3 as on. So that's all ready to go. Set those dip switches to our selected radio. Again, make sure you review each and every bit of information here. And the wiring interface, all the coloring is identified. from our purposes here today, this will match color for color to our radio wiring harness. So at this point, what we're going to do is go ahead and start matching up colors, getting everything soldered together. Then we've already put heat shrink on our connections that will move up and over those connections. We'll shrink it down with the heat gun once those cool, and wrap our harness with some Testa tape. So we went ahead and finished soldering up all our connections here. Really, for our Pioneer and our Pac adapter harness, it was color for color. We just added a lead off or remote turn on wire in case we added an amplifier down the road. We added an accessory, just an extra road wire. We just ran it in parallel with our red wire. The nice thing is our Pac module puts out 10 amps, so we can run an accessory off that if needed, which is super nice. So we left that out just in case, and then also a ground. But everything else is color for color, and really at this point in time what we need to do is grab our heat shrink, move them up and over those connections, and what we'll do is use a heat gun and shrink the tubes. So with these connections now cool, what we're going to use is some Testa tape just to protect the wire a little bit more in the dash from any sharp edges. So we're going to wrap our harness up, kind of getting it organized the way we like it. This Testa tape is great, it's pretty cheap, and also gives us a nice professional looking harness. So we got our harness all done and wrapped up. This end goes to our Pac module. This end goes to the truck. This is our WR remote for Pioneer. This goes for steering wheel controls. If your truck is equipped with an auxiliary input, ours is not, so this will just hang out in the dash. But this is our aux cable. Now the red and white stripe wire is our 12 volt programmable wire. We have no use for it at the moment, but we left it out in case we do hook it up to something. We threw a butt connector on it. And then also, since we added our own parallel leads off of the power ground and remote wire, we went ahead and just add that there, so that's easy and accessible down the road. Other than that, that's our main harness adapter. It's all good to go. So what we need to do now is get our brackets onto our radio and start really prepping the dash. So we have our radio brackets here. Now we are not doing the single DIN version, so we cut off the little bracket that supports the pocket. We're not using a pocket because we're doing a double DIN, so we cut that off and just filed it flat. Now this looks like to be left hand and right hand. So this is right hand at RH and this is left hand LH. So that'll go on this side, and then this will go on this side. And what we'll use is the screws supplied by Pioneer to get the kit installed to the radio. Okay, so we got the brackets on the radio, our bezels ready to go, and our wiring harness is done. At this point in time, we are finally ready to head into the car and start getting everything reinstalled. Okay, so we're at the point we've been all waiting for. Let's get this radio in the dash and give it a test. So, first things first, let's grab our harnesses. The first one we want to snag here is our USB, so let's go ahead and plug that one on in. Next one we have our AM/FM adapter, and it's the bigger of the two. The smaller one is for satellite radio. We're not doing satellite radio, so no need. That'll just hang out in the back of the dash. Next thing we need to do is grab our main harness here. Next thing here, let's go ahead and connect our brain module. Okay, so let's go ahead and get our radio now mounted. Alright, so I got 2 screws in just to kind of hold everything in place. Before I mount the rest of the screws, we want to go ahead and test everything. Okay, so we went ahead and got the radio in, everything plugged in. We did a boot up for the very first time. Stereo radio controls are working great, which is awesome. And nice thing about this Pac module, you can reprogram them to do what you want with them as well, in case you want the long and short press functionality set up. So we've tested our HVAC controls. Everything seems to work fine. And at this point, what we need to do is go ahead and attach our harnesses to our traction control as well as our hazard switch and get our bezel snapped back into the dash. Okay, that's it for this stereo install. If you have any questions on what we did here, go ahead and post a comment below. If you like this radio and you want to see more information about it, we actually did an unboxing of this radio, and we'll link it down in the description as well as a card up above. Do you have an F-150? Have you done this mod yourself before? Let us know how yours install went, and if you have any suggestions on great radios, throw them down in the comments. Be sure to hit that like button and subscribe. We post great content on the channel all the time, and we will see you in the next video. Thanks for watching.